The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Your neighborhood just got cooler with Kroger Delivery's refrigerated trucks. Simply order groceries at the same great prices online as in-store, and we'll bring them to you fresh every time. And if that wasn't cool enough, you can now earn 4 times the fuel points after 4 with your digital coupon. Choose a next-day Kroger Delivery time slot for 4 p.m. or later on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Must deliver by February 4th. Restrictions apply. See Kroger.com for details.
Amateur Traveler, episode 908. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about witches and waterfalls, glaciers and cheese, sauna boats, and the Sami culture as we go on a road trip in northern Norway. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Norway. I'd like to welcome to the show Torunn Tronsvang from Up Norway, who's come to talk to us about northern Norway. Torunn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris.
And I should say that our former guest, Susan Portnoy, recommend Torunn having done a tour with her in northern Norway. And so she comes highly recommended, but we've never met. Your connection to northern Norway, you lead tours there.
Yes, actually, I don't lead them physically, but we lead people to the north, hence the name Up Norway. And of course, our logo is the star, so the Northern Star. This is also a sign that we do lead people to Norway, but we do in fact create tailored itineraries so that they manage on their own when they travel. So we're basically in their pockets. If they need us, then we're there to help.
Excellent. And why should someone go to northern Norway?
There are so many good reasons why one should go to northern Norway. And I think just as an introduction to Norway, I think it's worth mentioning the trend now of cool cations, skipping the hot and steamy southern Europe and rather going up north to Norway and northern Norway.
Yeah, this is a good summer to recommend that. Yeah.
Exactly. And northern Norway, of course, if I were to summarize in one word, regardless of season, I'd say go there for the light.
Okay.
Because in the summer, you have the midnight sun, which means that you have this magical, radiant light all day and all night. If you go there in winter, you have the northern lights, but you also have Arctic light. So you have color nuances of pink, orange, sometimes turquoise. Of course, you have the very green, yellow northern lights on clear and starry nights. And the 2025 is actually a predicted peak in northern lights activity in an 11-year cyclus.
Okay, I did not know that.
No?
Excellent. And what kind of itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
I think today I would recommend an itinerary that is based on summer travel to Norway and to northern Norway. And I'd say, why not go for the world's northernmost road trip?
All right.
What you could do, let's say that you fly into Norway. Most travelers come in through Oslo. And then after a few days of easing in, getting rid of jet lag, I'd say fly up to a place called Kirkenes. There are direct flights that take approximately 2 hours. And from here, get a rental car. And then you can even take that rental car on board the Coastal Voyager Hurtigruta. then go across the Varanger fjord, and you end up in one of Norway's most interesting towns called Vardø.
I'm going to have to ask you to spell a few of these because I'm not going to be able to find them. The Norwegian pronunciation is stymieing me here. So you're taking and I called it Hurtigruten, so I've been saying that wrong, but the coastal ship over to what town?
So Vardø, it's spelled Vard, and then the Norwegian letter Ø, which looks like an O with a line through it. So you could also say Vardø with an O at the end.
Okay.
And then people would get where you're going. And the reason why Vardø is very fascinating, actually there are many reasons, but one thing is that it is part of what is called scenic route Varanger, because right now you're in the Varanger Peninsula, which stretches on the top of Norway towards Russia.
Okay. And we're north of the Arctic Circle here.
Oh yeah, we are at the top of Norway, the very, very top. So we've crossed the Arctic Circle many 100 kilometers south of us at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Vardø is actually one town that was known to be, or now when we look back, it's actually the place in Europe where one of the most severe witch burnings took place in the 1600s. So the history here is dark, mysterious, and mythical. There's a fortress and there's a beautiful, now my pronunciation is also going to be challenged, but there's a beautiful art piece created by architect Peter Sumter, but also the artist called Bourgois, French name. And they've created this incredible memorial for the people, mostly women, who were burned here as witches back in the 1600s because they challenged men in power position. So this is definitely a place to go to learn about history. And one other thing that is also worth going on its own is the incredible nature. This is the wild Arctic. This is tundra. This is a road where you drive and it's as if you were driving to the moon. Not that I have driven on the moon, but this is how I imagine it to be. There are more reindeer than people, beautiful natural landscapes, lots of natural resources. And it's also an incredible bird life in spring and early summer.
And in terms of when we should go, you've mentioned the light is going to be amazing all times of year. If I'm going in the winter, am I doing a road trip? Is that in winter? Okay.
No, it is partly accessible, but some parts of this incredible scenic route is actually closed. But also, you have to have experience driving on winter roads to be
I
able
would
to.
think so. Now, we have some listeners who have experience with that. I'm a Californian. So, what time of year do you think is the best time?
I think June, July, August, September are great months.
Got it. Okay.
Good for light, and the snow will have disappeared. Early in the summer, you have a lot of bird life. Sometimes you can see a lot of whales in the waters this time of the year. But the area is very sparsely populated and it's not very commercialized. So you won't have a lot of available hop-on whale safaris, for example. You can do activities like king crab fishing. There's actually, for people who are interested in World War history, there's a lot of remains and sites of interest going back to World War II. So there's a lot to see for many different people in these areas. And a common factor is that you'll have incredible produce, but there are not going to be any fancy restaurants. You have beautiful small places to stay, but you're not going to have any fancy hotels. But you'll have wonderful people, warm people, and you'll have a lot of indigenous people, the Sami people, there to be able to immerse you in their culture.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And in terms of places to stay, you say we're not going to have any big places, but I'm still going to be able to find them on my usual booking app of choice, or do I need to do something different in terms of booking accommodations?
Now that you ask, my recommendation would of course be to book through us, because then you don't have to think about the logistics or practical details. We will basically book everything, put it in our app, and you will just navigate using the app as you go. But these places that are available, of course, can also be found if you look at the destination pages for the Varanger region, for example.
Okay.
And then let's say you spend 3 nights in this region, you can continue driving west. And you will slowly then get to, or actually, yeah, slowly, you can get into sort of more in-depth areas where the indigenous population, the Samis, have their sort of main town in Norway called Karasjok. Another town is called Kautokeino. And then you'll move towards the Lyngen Alps. This is an area where you have spectacular mountains, but also incredible fjord landscapes. You have glaciers that can be hiked in summer, and you have beautiful places to stay, such as Lyngen Lodge, for example, a small lodge with just under 10 rooms that can be booked privately, but also as individual guests.
And you say it's a place where I can hike glaciers. Generally, the thing I have been told is you don't just decide to hike a glacier. You hike a glacier with somebody who knows where the
Definitely.
crevasses are. And
Okay.
okay,
So you'll have a guide with you, and you'll have proper safety measures in place so that you walk in ropes
okay.
and basically then be able to see the blue ice, which is quite incredible,
Hmm.
and get a different experience. It's of course also possible to do different hikes where you're not on a glacier, but many people do come to us and say that that has been one of the things that they really wanted to do.
Right. And what is a glacier that I can hike in the area?
Oh, if you want to hike a glacier in the Lyngen area, there is one called Steindalsbreen, and there's another
Okay.
one closer to Alta, which is even further west, called Øksendal.
And when you get us over to the Lingen area, that looks like on the map it's quite away from where we started. So that's not one day's drive, I'm assuming.
Definitely. This
Okay.
road trip is for people who like driving.
And are those the two endpoints of my trip?
The thing is, this can take as long or short
Hmm.
as you want.
For somebody who has 1 week, what would you recommend in terms of our itinerary where we would stop and such?
Yeah, so I'd say, let's say now that we've started in Varanger and Vardø. After we've
Yep.
flown to Kirkenes, we've taken the Hurtigruten across the fjord. And now we have 3 nights that we've spent in this area. We've explored lots of history relating to the World War, relating to the witches, relating to myths. We've
Oh,
explored.
and you said history. I noticed that also in Vardo, there's this looks like it's been an outpost for Norway for some time because I see a little star fortress there in town. And so that goes way back before World War II when this was used as an outpost for Norway to, I imagine, protect its frontier.
That's right. This is also where the women who were burnt as witches were convicted back in the days. So this is an old
Okay.
fortress. Yeah.
Got it.
Yes. So then you can get from the area of Varanger towards Lyngen in one day, but it's far. It's a long drive. What is
Hmm.
interesting if you are on a road trip or an excursion in this area in northern Norway, it's also possible to jump on the coastal express on Hurtigruten or Havila if you're
Mm.
traveling without a car and actually cruise the northern coast past the North Cape, and then you can, for example, step off in Tromsø. So you could drive, but you could also travel the coast using that coastal voyager, now
Okay.
perceived as a cruise line, but before it used to be the way
The
that people
mailboat. Yeah.
traveled. Yeah, the mailboat and the way we traveled along the coast.
It wasn't all that long ago it was perceived as the mailboat. I want to say within the last 20 years or
That's
so.
right.
My mother-in-law took it when it was still more of a mailboat than a cruise line. So
Yeah. And did you like it?
she did, except when they dumped the ice water down her back when they crossed the Arctic Circle. I don't think she was as enamored with that, but
She probably didn't know that now that is perceived to be very healthy. Lots of well or benefits now with all these cold
I'm not sure
plunges.
she would have been impressed, but
No? I think to put things in perspective, if we do look at distances in the far north, if you were to drive straight from
right.
Vardø and all the way to Tromsø, which is a city that most people may have heard of if they heard of northern Norway, you're
Hmm.
looking at approximately 11 and a half hours. And if you're driving the direct route, you're actually driving through parts of Finland. But if you do stay further north, it will take you even longer. But of course, you're not attempting to drive all of this in one day. You're trying to do it in different days and have these interesting stops along the way. And you'll see that even though this is northern Norway and it's really diverse. So you'll have Vardø, which is really remote, lots of plains, indigenous area that you'll move through. You will get to Lyngen, which is fjords and mountains. And then you'll move into Tromsø, which is what we call the Paris of the North. More urban environment and a lot more hotels, a lot more commercial, different excursions that you can do, boat cruises on hybrid ships like Brim Explorer. You can do different types of dining, of course, lots of different restaurants. There's a separate sauna boat. There's a gola you can take.
Pause there. A sauna boat. Now, I'm obviously in the Nordic countries here when I've got a sauna boat. What is a sauna boat?
A sauna boat is basically a boat that you can rent either just for a few hours or you can rent it for several days with a group of friends. And then there's basically a sauna on board the boat. So you can jump into the sea and then you can get on board the boat and then you can use the sauna.
So it's I'm looking at pictures of someone took a sauna and put it on a pontoon boat. And
Exactly.
that literally the only structure, the only inside is a sauna and with glass walls so you can see things. Okay. That is not
that's
something
the
I
Vulcana.
would have thought of.
Yeah, you'll find now in Norway that saunas, they actually come in all different forms. They are floating on the water. They are hidden in forests, in complete wilderness locations. They are everywhere. And in combination with Arctic cold dips, they're perceived to give immense health benefits.
Okay. Okay.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. The app is simple. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Download the Prize Picks Daily Fantasy Sports app today and use code FIELD and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FIELD on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
So you gave us a couple different options. One is we can get on the Hurtigruten and we can go to Tromsø, for instance, and then carry on from now we're in much more further west in northern Norway. We've come around the bulge there at the top. Or we could do the drive. You mentioned it takes 11 hours. We're not going to do it in 11 hours because we're here to see some things. So where would you suggest we stop? Where are we going to stop if we do the drive? Because we can't miss seeing what?
I think that the first stop should be actually if you look at starting in Vardø.
Yep.
What you could do is that, so you've come across, you've flown to Kirkenes, you're now in Vardø, and you've spent a few days here. Then you continue to Alta.
Okay.
Alta is mostly used as a winter destination, but I think it's very undersold as a summer destination because here you have an amazing canyon that can be explored both, of course, if you hike, but it can also be explored using river boats that are very common in the area and also on pack rafts, for example, as well as canoes and kayaks. And this is a great way to explore the wilderness in a beautiful landscape. And you can also explore this outback on the back of a horse, if that's of interest to you.
Now, Alta, again, looks like it's still quite far from Vardø. How long is it going to take me to get from one to the other?
Yeah, this is a decent one-day drive. If you go directly, it takes about 7 hours. So
would you recommend that, or is there any place I should stop before I get to Alta?
No, I think this is a good day trip, and you have to be prepared to go through. Of course, you'll see spectacular nature along the way, but they're not as if there are going to be many different commercial attractions. So this is for those who just want to go through the remote north, get a sense of the Arctic, what it's like, and then probably have to stop for a moose or reindeer along the way.
Well, that was going to be my question is I'm going to drive through some little towns along the way, but am I going to be seeing wildlife or reindeer herds, or what am I going to be seeing along the way in those 7
You
hours?
might. You'll see plains for sure, like a lot of flat land.
Right.
And of course, I have to say that I'm a big fan of spending 2 to 3 nights in one location, then moving on a
Yep.
greater distance, then having another 2 to 3 nights rather than doing one night
Okay.
here and one night there. But what you are missing on this route, if you go directly to Alta and not taking a detour towards the North Cape, is yet another stunning scenic route that is located towards Havøysund. So if you have the map in front of you, Chris, you'll see
I
that,
do.
when you get to the area called Lakselv, you can go north towards Olderfjord from Karasjok. So many different names here, they're probably all new to you. But you cross Karasjok, you'll have, I guess we could call it an intersection. Karasjok is the main center for the Sami population, our indigenous people. You'd go north, and then you'd continue till you get basically a bit further, and then you will choose not necessarily to drive out to Honningsvåg, which is the North Cape. It's, of course, an attraction to have been at the world's northernmost point. But the nicest road to drive here is the one going out to the village called Havøysund, where you'll find yet another of Norway's 18 official scenic routes.
Okay.
And again, this is something that you do for the drive, for the nature. There are a couple of islands, hidden treasures in these areas that are known for their molte. Do you know what molte is, Chris?
I do not.
Molte is a berry that we love.
Okay.
It's in English called cloudberry, and it looks like an orange raspberry. And it tastes wonderful, and it has lots of nutrients. And you have beautiful islands and areas like marshland up here in the north where they are everywhere.
Okay.
And this is what it's like with mushroom around the world. You don't tell people where you find these fields of molte that is ripe. You just run up and you make sure you pick it all before no one else can find it.
And is this something I'm going to have in my fika in the morning, or?
You could. We sometimes have it on a piece of bread. We very often eat. Yeah. So rather than making a full sandwich, you just have bread and then you put on lots of molte mixed with sugar, like a jam. You can also have it as a dessert with whipped cream or just cream all over it, or you just pick it as you walk, and it makes any hike more interesting.
Okay. And you say that this is a scenic highway. Now, I haven't spent a lot of time in Norway, but are there highways in Norway that are not scenic?
That's a good question. Yes, there are some that are not as scenic. And when you say highway, of course, this is not what an American would maybe classify as a highway, because the road is going to be quite small. But it's everything you can see on this road. And I think what's so special about these 18 scenic routes is that they have, not just are the roads particularly in good condition, but they also have incredible facilities where you stop for rest and a toilet visit, for example. So you have incredible toilets, beautiful art, architecture, and design. So all these different small stops you can make along the road also make them more interesting. And they're there to enhance the natural landscapes even more.
And what I'm getting the impression of in this landscape, so I'm not going to be seeing a lot of trees. I'm fairly far north here. So
That's correct.
I imagine I'm north of the tree line here. And so I'm going to be seeing a lot of flat, rugged landscapes, wet, with water, obviously the sea on my right or the ocean on my right as I'm driving up, but also lots of water on my left in different lakes and such. Am I in the right mental picture?
That's correct. Yeah, cliffs, you'll have the coastline, you'll also have fjords digging into the land from the coast. You'll have waterfalls coming down from mountains and a lot of flat land and a lot of remote areas where you'll spot, maybe a moose, maybe deer, and maybe a fox. No polar bears, because then you have to go even further north to Svalbard, but definitely a lot of reindeer.
Then you mentioned Tromsø, one of the jumping off places for Svalbard, in fact, would be Tromsø if I wanted to combine this trip with that trip.
Yes, I think Tromsø would be the end destination in the West if we're just looking at a week.
Yep.
Of course, you can continue,
Okay.
and we have guests traveling with us who do a full road trip from north to south, and they do that
Oh my
over
goodness.
4 weeks, for example.
Oh wow, that would take a while. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I think a lot of the fascination up here as well is not just the landscapes, but it's also the people. And we see that, of course, people come for Norway's natural beauty, but what they talk about when they leave are the people they've met. And even
Sure.
though I'm not from this part of Northern Norway, I'm from the south, I have to say that Northerners are probably the warmest and friendliest and most fun people in Norway. They're rugged and they're easygoing and they're very welcoming.
And you say the most. Now, the joke goes that you could tell a extrovert Norwegian from an introvert Norwegian because when an extrovert will look at your shoes when they talk to you. I don't know if that's at all accurate, but Norwegians are not necessarily regarded as the most outgoing people.
That is correct. And I was made aware of this by my colleague actually last week, that he thinks that introversion is a very well known Norwegian quality and a value that we keep, because you're right, we're not very outgoing, we're not very overly friendly, asking everyone how they are. But when we start talking, we are genuine and we
Okay.
talk if we're interested and we remember what you tell us, and we're willing to help when we have guests that are not native to where they are.
Excellent.
But we don't randomly seek contact with people who don't seek contact with us first.
Got it. Okay. And then you mentioned Karasok as being a place where it is a center for the Sami culture. Are there ways that I can interact with that culture or learn more about it along this route?
Definitely. So, of course, in Karasjok, you'll find the Sami Parliament, and it's possible to visit the Sami
Interesting.
Parliament to
Okay.
get a tour and learn more about the struggles they've had through history. And I think, of course, to spend time in this area, you'll probably be hosted by people who are Samis, and the Samis are reindeer herders from way back, and they're
Right.
also fisherwomen as well. And to take time, like they're also not going to come and tell you something unless you ask them first, but they're willing to share their history if you listen to them and introduce you to their stories through storytelling, through food, through letting you participate in certain aspects of their reindeer herding, and also introducing you to their way of perceiving time, because they don't use the clock like we do or a watch. They use the reindeer as guidance, the weather as guidance, the light as guidance, and they act according to that. Of course, many of them have modernized, but this is where you sort of ease into what's happening around you, and you're steered by the external circumstances that are ever changing elements rather than being steered by the time on your watch. And I think that's an interesting way of just immersing into the local culture. Another important aspect is, of course, the Sami yoik, their way of singing.
Okay.
So like when you're born as a Sami, you will get your own yoik and your own meaning. And the yoik is supposed to reflect who you are. It's a very personal thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I think one thing that many people don't know is that the two Disney movies, Frozen, they have a lot of inspiration, not just from Norway, but also from Northern Norway and from the Sami culture. So
Okay. I
the
did
whole
not know that.
the whole storyline in Frozen 2 is actually from Alta. And it's a controversy that happened in the Alta Dam, where they wanted to build a dam that would actually flood a whole Sami village in the north. And this was the idea for Frozen 2. That's what the story is built around.
Okay. Got it. And I talked about us traveling in northern Norway. As we were taking your route here that got us over to Karlstad, we were actually driving the border between Norway and Finland. So
That's
we
correct.
were along the border for all that. It seems like the border and the road are pretty much the same place.
That's right. There's a river between.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we're following the river up from its mouth. Okay.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You were taking us further over to Tromsø, and I interrupted you. Do you want to get back to Tromsø and saying what we're going to see there? And I apologize for all my Norwegian pronunciation here, but
I think you're doing really well. I think we have now traveled then from Kirkenes, we've traveled to Karasjok. Maybe we
yep,
continue to Alta, or we take a detour and go north towards the North Cape and the scenic route Havøysund.
yep.
Or then we continue from Alta towards Tromsø. I think also before we leave Alta, it's important to recognize that Alta is also a culinary destination with incredible
Okay.
kitchens and restaurants that are based on local produce and local traditions.
Hang on a second.
Yeah.
You can't just say that and then move on. Where can I appreciate that? Are there particular restaurants you would recommend, or are there particular dishes we should try?
Yeah, I think definitely Trasti and Trine is worth a stop. This is a place where you have a family where the husband is a chef and the wife is actually a professional musher, and her children are mushers too. So they
So we're talking
participate.
about dog sleds.
That's right. So they
Okay.
have a husky lodge, they have some incredible accommodations and different activities that they take guests out on, but they also have an incredible kitchen. And the produce that they use is, of course, based around reindeer and game, and also
Okay.
berries that they can harvest and forage from the forage, mushrooms, different types of mushrooms, and fish, of course.
Got it. Okay.
And then we also have a really nice restaurant that is based in the lodge called Sorisniva Arctic Wilderness Lodge, where you have one casual and one more fancy restaurants where you can dine and really have some incredible meals. And also in the city center, or shall I say town center of Alta, you have a selection of more casual restaurants to choose from.
Got it.
But I have
Okay.
to say, in this area, the best food is what you get when you go out on an outdoor excursion and adventure, and you bring your packed lunch, your thermos maybe with hot chocolate, or you bring some easy prepared food and you prepare it on the bonfire in the outdoors. That's what tastes the absolute best.
And that also has the advantage. Norway eating out has a reputation of being not cheap.
Yes, I guess you can say that. We do have a high tax on our food, in addition
Mhm.
to the high cost of living in Norway, which also makes the produce we put into the meals quite expensive or high cost. And that's why I think also it's important to recognize all the efforts that have been made over the last decade to really improve the quality in the Norwegian kitchen.
Mhm.
And to just add a few sort of highlights.
Hey, Atlanta, Apple is open for small business. That's right. We're here to make starting and running your business simpler. With privacy and security built in on all devices, it's easy for you to protect your customers' data. And if you need hardware or software support, you'll get advice from business experts at no cost whatsoever. So you can focus more on the soup du jour and less on, the other stuff. At Apple, we're open for your small business. Go to apple.com/small business or visit an Apple store to learn more.
It's worth mentioning that since 2016, Norway has won the World Cheese Awards 3 times.
I had no idea. I don't think of Norway's with cheese. Controversial. What's the best cheese in Norway? But I'll ask it anyway.
Yeah, right now, the winner of the World Cheese Awards last year is a small dairy called Gangstad, based in mid-Norway in Trondheim, and it's a blue cheese.
Okay. Got it. It
And
is similar to blue cheese that I know, or is there anything particularly different about it?
it's a typical blue cheese, but what is different about it is, I would say, it's the balance. And when you eat it, it sort of melts in your mouth and you just feel this incredible balance rather than the sharpness that you can find in some blue cheeses.
Okay. Interesting.
Just
I
milky
I'm
and
a blue cheese
delicious.
fan, but I know some people are not.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We also have a more like a similar to a yellow Gouda type cheese that
Yep.
won, I believe it must have been in 2018, which is based outside of Bergen. It's a cheese called Fanaost from a dairy called Ostegården. So that's another type of cheese for those who are not blue cheese fans.
Got it. Okay. And I'll put links to all of these in the show notes for people who are
Excellent.
wondering
Excellent.
what those different words are that our guest is saying here. Excellent.
And I think it's worth mentioning that when it comes to the Paul Bocuse, he has this world championship in culinary arts called the Bocuse d'Or. Also a
Okay.
French word that I probably pronounced terribly. And no one has more awards in Bocuse d'Or than Norway, even though we're not recognized yet in an international scale as the
Interesting.
culinary destination we should be known for. And I say this, of course, I'm not objective. I might be a little bit biased, but
That
again,
is okay.
yeah, if you look at what we see is that people are so surprised when they come to Norway and they're not prepared to find food at the quality level that they find now. And one of the key ingredients that was used in the Bocuse d'Or, which was actually held in Trondheim in Norway this year, the European Championship, was reindeer. So now we've taught all these
Interesting.
incredible European chefs how to use reindeer as an ingredient. And I think that's super interesting and very important also because for the Sami, the reindeer has a lot of status. It's important for them to use the entire animal. And now we're teaching people to do that and appreciate it as well.
The other thing that caught my eye in Alta before we move on from there is the World Heritage Center for Rock Carvings.
That's correct.
And I don't know what that would be, but
yeah, so rock carvings is basically what people use to communicate in a written language, be it letters or actually
this
carvings.
is petroglyphs. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, dating from way back, I believe 10,000 years, but that I have to quality check if actually is right. But this is another interesting thing to see in Alta.
Okay. Anything else we want to see in Alta before we move on, as you were doing previously?
Yeah, I think remembering that we're here in summer, so you have light all the time. But again, even though we don't see the northern lights in summer, it's worth mentioning that Alta has been a research station for northern lights. So it's also possible to visit Alta Museum to learn more about the northern lights.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned a musher. Obviously, if we're coming back here in winter, we're doing different activities as well.
Definitely. Dog sledding.
And then you moved us on then towards Tromsø, but was there any other place you wanted to stop before we got there?
Yeah, we have talked about Lyngen.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, premature there with mentioning Lyngen, but Lyngen and the Lyngen Alps is definitely a destination worth a stop. And this is where you can really have incredible outdoor activities, be it in the fjord, hiking in the mountains, and just enjoying spectacular landscapes in some beautiful lodges.
And so I'm picturing snow-capped peaks even if I'm there in June.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And then from Lyngen, we move on to Tromsø.
Okay.
And again, now
you had all sorts of things we could do in Tromsø.
Yeah, definitely. So now we're back to an urban environment, but you're still in the midst of Arctic nature. You have incredible architecture in Tromsø. One example is the Arctic Cathedral, Ishavskatedralen, which is, of course, a spectacular site, but it's also a place where you can go and experience a concert with local music.
Well, and you say an urban environment, it's less than 80,000 people, depending on where you're from. That's a big city or a small village. If you're from China, that's doesn't count, but exactly.
Yes. But of course, I think for me, a city that has a university, so it's a city that is always very vibrant. There are a lot of musical events, there are a lot of cultural events. There's a yearly film festival, cinemas, library, and of course, a lot of restaurants, bars, event arenas. And outside of Tromsø city or town, you also have incredible nature experiences. I have to say, I was actually there with an amazing group of people just a month or so ago, where we traveled with people who had spinal injuries or invisible handicaps. And we got to try to experience Tromsø from the seat of a wheelchair, which was very interesting. And we did activities like Arctic floating. So we all got on dry suits and we got out into the water and we're floating around. A lot of fun. Okay. We also headed out to the island called Sommarøya, so Summer Island, and we kayaked in the archipelago outside of that island, and it is absolutely stunning. Turquoise waters, there are beautiful sandy beaches, and just light and pureness. So clean, so gorgeous, and yeah, what a day.
Now, one thing that surprised me, you were saying they have a film festival. I was just assuming that one holds a film festival in the summer. But of course, that actually wouldn't make as much sense when you've got the long days. So they hold it in January.
Yeah, because you don't want to be inside and watch movies when it's light all the time. You'll do that when it's dark outside.
It makes perfect sense to me, but it just isn't the way I think. And I see that they even have one outdoor setting where they're sitting out in the snow watching their films during the film festival.
Yes, and I think in this area in the north, when I was passing through the town called Kautokeino, which is also on the road that we've now taken,
Yeah.
I have been to the cinema, a cinema that is actually made of ice. So you sit outside and there's no white screen, but it's basically a screen made of ice.
All right. So those are some of the things we're going to do if we're doing here in the wintertime. We're going to do the mushing and the northern lights and apparently the film festival if we come in January.
That would be recommended, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Excellent. Anything else we're going to do in Tromsø?
Of course, there's a lot to do outside. There are islands around Tromsø as well that can be explored. But I think for a week, we've done a lot at this point.
Okay. It feels like we're getting to the wrap-up point here. Okay, excellent. Anything else about the route you want to mention before we get to some of our wrap-up questions?
On a side note, that the names of the glaciers, I can get back to you just to make sure that I'm giving you the right names. But other than that, for the road trip itself, I think that that's about it. And then another very interesting point worth mentioning is that no one has more electrical cars per capita than Norwegians.
Interesting.
And even though it is harder in the north, in this area, which is so remote, to drive an electric car, it is possible.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised because the battery life of an electric car doesn't work as well in winter, when you have real winter.
No, but in summer.
Yeah. Interesting.
But of course, this is, if you are to do a road trip in Norway, this is very often the chance people have to do an electric road trip. But usually they do that further south than the area that we've traveled through now.
Okay. Interesting. Excellent. And then anything else we should just know in general about Norway before we go?
About Northern Norway or Norway?
Either one.
Oh, there's so much. Hard to choose.
That would be relevant for this trip.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned the cool cation trend. We've mentioned the cold plunges. And I think that Norway is a destination now that has become so popular. So if you do want to go, considering that these areas, they're hard to find on your own, but when you find them, they're not very big. So don't wait until the last minute before you book. Try to book early. So now is a good time to book for next summer, for example. A year in advance or 8 to 10 months in advance as well is good.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, you are standing in the prettiest spot along this entire route that we've talked about. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I'm standing on Hornøya Island.
Okay.
And I'm close to a lighthouse on the island. And when I look out, there is a lot of greenery. There are yellow flowers and there's ocean. I can see Vardø town a little bit further away. But I can also see this incredible bird life all over, in the air and on the ground. And there are puffins and there are rare species of migrating birds that are just so vibrant and full of life, reminding us that after every cold and dark winter, there is the beautiful warming and light spring and summer.
Okay, so if I've got you in the right spot, you're out by the Vardø lighthouse. So you actually went further east than the easternmost part we talked about so far. You
That's
took
correct.
A boat trip out to see the bird life on the island. Excellent.
Yeah, I took a small boat that goes every day. It takes about 10 minutes between the mainland and the Hornøya Island.
Excellent. One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Northern Norway?
I think we have a saying there's a joke between the Sri Lankans and the Indians in terms of time, and we have the same between Norwegians and the Samis. So we call it the Sami half hour. So I think whenever you think about time in the north, you have to remember that everything happens in a slower pace, and just rather than let it annoy you, you just let your shoulders down and you just go with the flow and realize that things will always happen too late and later than it is scheduled. And that's life.
All right. And then if you had to summarize the region, you've already summarized it in one word, which was light. If I gave you 3 words, what would you use to describe this region?
Light, Arctic, and Sami.
Sami, excellent. Our guest again is Torunn Tronsvang. And if people are looking to plan a trip to this area, you can certainly go to upnorway.com. And then I don't recall, do you have a blog or other information there if we wanted to send people to learn more about this trip? Where would we send them?
We have a part on our website called Inspiration. So this is a good resource with articles. We have one about Sami people there, where it's possible to go. We have one about Svalbard for those who want to go even further north. And we're just revising our northernmost road trip itinerary at the moment. So it's not there right now, but it will come in a revised and renewed form in a few weeks.
Got it. We'll put a link to the inspiration part so that people can go and take a look if they're already dreaming about going to Northern Norway after listening to you talk about it.
Yeah, and this is just a small piece of it.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us your obvious love for Northern Norway.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Thanks to both the sponsors of this show as well as to the patrons of this show who help support this show financially. If you have any interest in becoming a patron of the show or think you might like to learn more about it, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. I got a couple emails from Owen lately about the episode we did on the Great West Way. I'm a longtime listener of your podcast. As a Brit, I was interested to listen to your recent Great West Way episode. However, please note it is not the Borough Market, simply Borough Market, and it is not a New York borough, so it isn't pronounced borough, it's pronounced borough. I would also recommend that your guest looks up the pronunciation of, I'm going to say this wrong, Southwark. It is not Southwark. It is disappointing when you have guests on who purport to know about the area but can't even pronounce the core areas. It kind of undermines their apparent knowledge of the area. And then I wrote back to Owen. I'll tell you what I said. I said, Owen, sorry to disappoint you. Some of our guests are experts on the places they are talking about, but not all of them. While I try to find experts, I am somewhat limited by people who pitch me or who I can track down. I don't know that I would have claimed that this guest was an expert on the area, just that she had been there and loved it and thought others might as well. And Owen wrote back and said, hi, Chris. Thanks for your reply. Sorry, my emails were rather grumpy, so my apologies for that. I actually really enjoyed the episode and have been a listener of yours for years. Thanks for making the podcast, Owen. And I bring this up because I think sometimes people hear about someplace that they know really well and can be disappointed that we said that wrong or that we left this out or whatever. And I would encourage you that perhaps the reason why I did that show and not the one that you have in your head is that you didn't pitch it to me. And so it's 19 years in. If we haven't gotten a show on your area, maybe that's something you ought to be pitching me. Doesn't have to be a travel writer or a travel guidebook author or something like that. Sometimes I love to have on somebody who is a local, who knows the area and can show me what they would recommend if they had a friend coming to see it. So think about that and maybe pitch me an episode yourself. New on the website, one thing that's new is I just bought a new website, and that is the Hotel Scoop website. That's hotel-scoop.com, which is a hotel review website. And so there'll be more links back and forth from Amateur Traveler to Hotel Scoop in the future. Don't be too surprised at that. And then new since the last episode of Amateur Traveler, there are articles on San Jose's rose gardens. I'll be writing more about California because that's where I'm spending a lot of my time these days. There's also an article on the Northern Nevada Heritage Railroads and the 25 best things to do in Auckland, New Zealand. So check those out at amateurtraveler.com. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one